It's funny how we see someone and we're like, are they like a light worker or a witch or like a personal development person? Like, what is the thing? And we can definitely deep dive into this, but my thing is not having a thing.
This is the deep dive with Adam Roa. Yo, what is up, deep divers and create community? My name is Adam Roa. I'm your host, and today's guest is Sahara Rose, who is I describe you as being a real life goddess, right? That's the way that I've seen it, and I've tried to be honest with you. I tried to pin down your content and put you in a box so that I could figure like where you fit, and it doesn't exist, which I love. I love that. You are the host of the Highest Self podcast, and you've written a couple different books, Eat, Feel Fresh, and An Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda. And so, yeah, you're just a badass. And one of my favorite reasons, when I knew that the first time I ever reached out to you was about potentially teaching twerking, like a twerking dance shop in the Create community. So that can give people, she's written food books, she's got a Highest Self podcast, and she is twerking so successfully that I wanted to bring that into the Create community. So that just gives an idea, a glimpse into the multifaceted goddess that you are. I just want to welcome you and say thank you, Sahara Rose, for making the time to come on the deep dive and the Create community today.
Well, thank you for seeing all parts of me. And it's funny how we see someone and we're like, are they like a light worker or a witch or like a personal development person? Like, what is the thing? And we can definitely deep dive into this, but my thing is not having a thing. It's embracing all sides of me.
Yeah, we're in a renaissance, right? We're in this renaissance where I think that I'll speak for my parents. I feel like my parents grew up in a time where it was very important to figure out what your career was as soon as possible so that you could get a head start to get into that career and line yourself up really well to make a good enough income where you could buy a house and then have an asset and invest and do these things and raise a family. And now I see more and more this desire to not be put in a box and say, you know what, I want to be able to do poetry and filmmaking and music and run a business and all of the things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly where the new paradigm is going. And I think, we've spent so much of our lives as millennials, personal branding ourselves. I mean, we started MySpace when we were like, 12 years old. And it was like, how can I tell the world like who I am in this one caption? So our brains have been kind of trained to brand ourselves for other people to understand us. And that pegs us to this very limited, AIM profile of who you are. And I think right now we're finally moving out of that. And I think the confusing part of it is, well, how will people find me if they don't know what to call me? And I do want to say that I did definitely have a niche at the beginning of starting my work. It was Ayurveda. So I was obsessed with Ayurveda. I wrote books about it. I went so far into it. I lived in India. Like I was the Ayurveda queen. But eventually I hit this point that I was like, are these really the conversations I'm going to have forever? Like, vata pitta kapha, da 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 da. Like it felt. Some people I think can have the same conversation over and over again for the rest of their lives. And some people who are just more creative, more vata, as I would say, cannot. And I would rather be misunderstood than repeat myself and only use a limited part of my brain.
I I love that sentence. I would rather be misunderstood than repeat myself. I actually really appreciate that perspective because I feel like I spend a lot of my time actually in the inquiry of how do I get people to understand. It's a fine balance because as an artist, it's not actually about getting you to understand. The art is about me getting to express.
Mm-hmm.
And then as an influencer, as a coach, as someone who very much is concerned with helping people understand the fundamentals of things like compassion or mindset or that, then it is important for me to make sure that that understanding gets to be wrapped in what I'm doing. So I feel like I bounce back and forth between those two. Do
And they can
you?
understand what you are doing. Like when you are saying a poetry piece, I am understanding, but I don't have to then classify you as a poet. You can then be just as understood talking about climate change or talking about something else. So I think it's in the moment you want to be understood, but don't let that feeling of being misunderstood keep you from tapping into your true essence, your true dharma, which is not limited to one role.
Hmm. And so, do you feel like, would you advise people listening to this now, people tuned in right here live, would you advise them to focus on one thing initially? Because I know you're not doing it now and I'm not doing it now, but I would say that I've been singular focused at various stages. So to have this multifaceted aspect of you and your business, if someone was starting out and didn't feel like they had that one thing, would you advise them to have it?
I would say if you are someone who starts a lot of projects and cannot finish them, then yes, go for something and see it to completion. Like I have this analogy of moving it through your doshas. The vata is the idea, the pitta is the execution, and the kapha is the reevaluation. So a lot of us, especially creative types, we're so in the vata, like, I want to do this and I want to do that. And it's like all of these new things that we, notebooks that you write the first page in that you never finish. So if that's you, see something to completion, but also don't divorce yourself from those other aspects of you. So as I was writing my Ayurveda book, I kept going to dance class. I kept, when I could, painting or doing whatever else. It wasn't part of my career. It wasn't something that I was really even sharing that much, but they were still aspects of me that I was continuing to nourish.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, what I would say that I've learned a lot in my entrepreneurial journey over the years is that not every aspect of it isn't mine to do. And so there are people in here, I see a lot of comments coming through around people who can relate to having so many different things and maybe not finding one to completion. Another option, because I do think it is valuable to learn what it takes to actually complete something. There's a difference between not doing it because you've learned that that's not your genius and not yours to do, and not doing it because you have unprocessed limiting beliefs around that whole thing that you haven't actually faced off with and seen through, and can only be faced off with when you are in that last 10 meters of the race, right? And so, but one thing that I've learned is I can take a project from inception to 50 to 75% of the way there before I start to notice myself lose steam and go, this is not, I'm now at this 50% mark. I feel myself losing steam. And so I am building my business and have been building my business in a way where I put people in their genius around me who are great at like taking the baton at that 60% mark and starting to run with it, to finish it. And the other way applies too, because so many people talk about the visionary standpoint, and then we need the integrators. They're equally important. And for some of you who are listening to this, you might realize you're great at getting stuff done, but you feel trapped in not knowing how to expand out of what you're currently doing. You're a perfect partner for someone who's in that visionary state, who has a bunch of ideas and could really use someone who's great at getting it done. And so on both sides, I am encouraging right now in my own life a lot of collaboration.
Mm-hmm. And I think if I were me 5 years ago, hearing you say that, I would say, I don't have the money to pay for people to take the baton. I have to do everything myself. And I think a lot of us listening right now feel like that. And what I've noticed is those points, that 50, 60% where you feel like I can't do this anymore, that is actually you on the brink of expansion. It's like when you are writing or you're doing something and you're like, fuck, I need to eat, or I need to go on Instagram or do something else. That is actually your soul expanding to something that you have never experienced before. And your ego doesn't know where you are going. So it tries to basically get you out of the experience. Let's take a snack. Let's go on social media. Because if you actually sit in it, then that's no longer going to be a limitation for you. And your ego just doesn't know where that goes. Like, for example, I had to write Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda, which is a 400 plus page textbook, start to finish in 6 weeks. Right? I was on a deadline. I had to basically write the textbook that would modernize Ayurveda for like the US. So there was
no big deal.
Yeah. And there was no time, like, time breaks or anything like that. Like I was just in it. And there were so many times that I was like, I can't go on. I can't go on. But I would just keep remembering, like, if I can move through this, then I can bring my modern approach. I can bring this, I can bring that. And I don't like to use the word pay your dues, but what I see a lot of creative people, and I will call it out, is they're like, I want to bring my unique approach to this and this and this. And it's like, well, what have you actually put out into the world? Like sometimes what you have to put out into the world is something that's hard. Maybe it's something that's not even totally in your zone of genius, but you have to do it to show the world what knowledge you already have, and then you can bring your unique spins to it.
Such a great point. This used to bother me when I was an aspiring actor because I would be waiting for my phone to ring for an audition, and then I was like, no one understands how good I am and how much I've worked, and like I'm not getting the opportunities. If only I had the opportunity, I could prove myself. And what's funny is I would look around and see these groups of friends kind of coming up together. You would have like the set. Hold on. You would have the Seth Rogans with the James Francos, and you would have these groups of friends like the Will Ferrells and the John C. Reillys, these groups coming up, Paul Rudd, together. And I always thought it was, and they talk about nepotism and all this stuff. Well, what I realized was when you've burst through that expansion point that you're talking about, where most people stop, you are now in a room with people who've also done that. And so having broken through that and being in that room and seeing people enter, there's a moment of, I know what it took for you to get into this room. And so immediately there's a level of respect and understanding that is vital to the relationships with people I want to collaborate with. And so I have this understanding where I used to judge it. I now think, wow, someone who's actually taken the time to launch something on their own, no matter how successful it is. And that's something I'd like to get across to people is don't base it off of whether you succeeded financially or whatever it is. Just the fact that you did something, you launched it, you saw it through, you went from point 0 to 100 will put you in a 1% category of people who have broken through the very expansion walls where most people stop.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think for creatives, again, bringing it back to like the doshas and energy, we have so much energy up here in the upper chakras that we're like channels for ideas, like in the Vedas, they say ideas are like clouds and we're all actually picking up on them, but it's up to the person to execute it. That's why you see patents filed at the same time in totally different states. The ideas are there. They actually don't belong to any of us. They're universal. They're waiting to come through. So a lot of us were tuned into the ideas, but then we don't bring it through the middle parts of our body, the execution. So like the solar plexus chakra, which is really the doing and the getting shit done and the having the schedule and the parts that don't feel as spiritual Burning Man woo vibes. And we stop right there. So guess what? It just flies to the next person. You're like, oh my God, I had that idea. And now it's on Shark Tank. Well, it's like, bitch, you didn't do anything about it. So it wasn't your idea. You have to move the idea through your system. And then finally, when it's at this point of doing an execution that it can take its own legs, that's through another person, that's through it becoming a movement, et cetera, like this create community. Then from there, it moves into the joy, the pleasure, which is sacral chakra. And then root chakra is it becomes something larger than you. So if you constantly look at where am I in the cycle through the chakras, am I up here? Am I in the middle? Am I down here? You can look at what's next. And it's this ongoing cycle. Like let's say you just birthed this project, you just finished your documentary. From there, you're in that kapha, you're in that space of the sacred pause. Then you have the space to see what's the next idea that wants to come through you. And then also having a little bit of distinction of which ideas do you want to bring through. Like we are creators and creatrixes. There's so many things that we can do, but is this something that you want to commit to? Is this something you want to keep doing even when it doesn't feel exciting? I think if a lot of people really sat with that, they wouldn't start as many things as they do.
Mickey Agarwal was on this exact show. Do you know Mickey?
Yes.
Yeah, she's amazing. And one of the things that she says that's really important is, am I willing to do this for 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
If this was my thing that I was committed to, am I willing to see it through for 10 years of my life? If the answer is no, then don't do it. Don't do it, because for most people, and I heard this, by the way, I heard this in acting too. They said every overnight success has been at it for 10 years. And so people don't understand what went into it before they became aware of that person's success.
Absolutely.
All of those things that go in. And so for you, when it was Ayurveda, what was the thing that really sparked? Am I correct in assuming that that book really launched things for you?
So I initially started, having health problems and Ayurveda helping me. So I had perimenopause. My body was shutting down. They said I'd never be able to have children. I lost tons of weight, hair. I couldn't digest food. I was put on tons of prescription medication. And through the healing process, I discovered Ayurveda and it worked for me. So because I was naturally so excited about learning about it, that took me into studying it. And that took me into realizing how it's so complex and old school and lots of Sanskrit terminology that there are so many people like me who had digestive and hormonal imbalances that could really benefit from this. So why don't I write a book to modernize it? So that was the initial spark. And then that journey of how do I write a book, not ever meeting an author. I did not live in any kind of conscious creative community at all. No entrepreneur type people in my family. And that journey of me writing the book is actually what led me to finding the truth of who I was, because I was confronted with all of the limiting beliefs I had that were passed on to me from society, especially from my own family, telling me being a writer is like being a starving artist. You're never going to make it. You are delusional. You're going to become homeless. And taking that into consideration and oftentimes believing it, but also having this yearning in my soul that was so much greater than me to do it. So it took me 2 years to write that first book because I didn't know anything about writing a book. I thought you just write it and then somehow it ends up at Barnes and Nobles. And from that journey of trying to write a book, long story short, I wrote the book and I was rejected by 30 different publishers. So after all of that work, they all said the same exact fears that I had. You're too young. No one knows what Ayurveda is. It's never going to happen. You might as well give up. So that was a really good time to just stop, right? Here I had affirmation from the outside world. It wasn't going to happen. And I thought maybe I'll just go become a real estate agent. I'll just do what my parents are telling me to do. Maybe that was just the journey was me writing the book, but never actually getting it published, right? And then from there, that same literary agent was contacted by Penguin Random House because they were looking for someone to write the official Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda. There was an author who was 4 months into the 6 months it normally takes to write it, and she quit. So they needed someone to start and finish this book in that end of the 2 month period.
That's the 6 week thing you were talking about.
Exactly. So she asked me, oh, would you be interested in writing it? And my first response was like, I don't want to write a textbook. I want to write my version where I'm modernizing it and it's plant-based and it's gluten-free and it's this and this and this. Cause I thought, I have this great idea. But then I realized, you know what? Maybe this is the only chance I'll get right now to even write a book. So I might as well take this opportunity. And they didn't just give it to me. I had to, write a first chapter and read like a million different idiots guidebooks to learn the tone and basically write a book in a different tone, different from the version that I would have written as myself, which is actually more challenging. Like imagine explaining the same thing, but in two different ways, right? So I wrote that book, but then the moment it was done, I then used that book to say, well, since you can see that I can write a book on Ayurveda, I have this idea to write a more modernized version of it. And that became my book, Eat, Feel Fresh, which led on to my next book, Discover Your Dharma. So that's why I really believe anyone, if whatever creative thing you want to do, if you can get the opportunity to do it, even if it's not exactly your original idea, that just brings your foot in the door and shows whoever you would collaborate with something that you can bring to the table.
Wow. So I felt exhausted just listening to to your story, because I knew what went into that. To have 6 weeks to go in and study what they needed, write the first chapter, rework the information in a way that fit the narrative they wanted. I can't even, and that's incredible. And so in that process, something that I'm curious about, would you say that by the time you were writing that book, you were embodied in your Ayurvedic knowledge?
I think
Like,
writing that book took me to the next level because I had to understand it to such a level that I could so deeply simplify it. So I believe that it was training, like spirit needed me to write that book to get me so grounded in the information and things that I otherwise was not even studying or talking about, which then allowed me to, be a credible source of Ayurveda.
yeah, so that's been my thing too, and putting the pieces together in real time in my brain here is that uh, it was something that you wanted to embody. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
something that you were so passionate about that you were saying, this is a part of me and what I stand for, what I believe, how I live. And because you wanted to embody it, the natural kind of evolution of that becomes the outward expression of it, because the one of the best ways to learn is to teach. To be able to explain it to someone else, you have to break it down into all its parts and really understand that. And so similarly with me and the artistic process of poetry or filmmaking or whatever, it started with, this is something that I want for the rest of my life. This is something that I want to embody for the rest of my life. This is something that I want to make art the lens through which I live, not something I do. And so as I began to do that process, all of a sudden the creating of it and then the teaching of it and the hiring of people and teaching them how to do it and all of that stuff was really what allowed it to get to a place of embodiment. But I think the key there that I'm really honing in on is that for both of us in our journeys, it started with something that we weren't doing for other people. We were never doing it for other people. And that's where, getting back to your point, where it's not just about, oh, let me just find the partner who can complete this for me or just hire someone to do it for me. It's in understanding that if you literally have never done that final 40%, and you've never faced off with what it takes to get that to completion, hiring someone to do that will not actually solve the underlying limiting beliefs, fears, doubts, insecurities that are the thing that have prevented that last 40% to begin with. And the only thing that I have found that really gets people through that consistently is to find the thing that they want to embody. Like we can call it a passion, but finding that something where you go, this, I want to be a part of my life. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I just want it to be a part of my life.
Absolutely. And I think that that's such an important point to make because I see a lot of people, oh, I really want to write a book, so I'm going to hire a ghostwriter. It's like, well, then why do you want to write a book? You like the idea of having a book, but if you don't want your actual words in it, is that something that you even feel connected to? Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable like sharing something from the top of the world that I actually played no role in writing, even if it was my idea. So I think people today think that, oh, I need to have a book to be successful and these elective things on my resume. But if you're, first of all, not willing to embody the journey of it, then I think who are you to talk about it?
Mm. Call them out. That's one of the things that I love about your content is you keep it real. I'd like to think that I do that too. I just did an Instagram live this morning with Preston Smiles, who's been on this show as well, and is someone who we went into the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery and really dove in and spoke our minds on that. And another thing that we didn't actually get to, but I saw you posted about it in your Instagram story, is my friend Mickey Willis did a documentary called Plandemic, and really diving into the conspiracy around what's really going on during this pandemic. There's two places we can go here. We can go down that road to talk about it, but more what I want to start with is what has sparked in you to be the person who's always keeping it real. You know what I mean? I actually think it's really, I was going to say ballsy, but like over easy, that to say that you're basically saying, I'm a goddess, I'm a badass, I can be in touch with all of these things. I can be spiritual and I can twerk and I can dance and I can do it while listening to some ratchet rap song. And I love that you're willing to embody all of the different facets of you, because that is human. But I know that, and we probably both know a lot of people who are so concerned with the image, that they would never dare to do that. And so I'm curious if that's always been you, if you had to adjust once your social media started taking off. Did you go through periods with this? What has that journey been like?
Yeah, so I think that they were, growing up, I was a hip hop dancer. Like that has always been a side of me. And I started yoga when I was 12. So I've always had these different sides to me, but they were definitely not what I was presenting. My family comes from child marriage and a lot of patriarchy in the Middle East. And to this day, my mom is like, why do you post these videos of you? Like every single time I post them still today, I'm like, you're still not used to it. So I have seen firsthand what that patriarchy looks like, what living in fear and living in suppression and living for what other people think, that you're so afraid of living your own life because it's my own family. So I think.
Do you,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt
Go
you, but
ahead.
I would love to clarify here. Do you believe that, because it's your mother who's saying, why are you posting these videos, for example, do you believe that that is definitely the result of the patriarchy? Because I have a lot of opinions around, obviously we have been living in a patriarchy, and I think that is shifting, and very, very good that it is shifting. And do you think that it is entirely, that's the reason why? Because I find that I hear these stories quite often about women speaking to other women around, yo, don't do that or don't do this. And I'm curious just your thoughts on that before you moved
I
on.
mean, I think that patriarchy is a word over a larger system, right? Like, as you said, a woman can shame a different woman, but specifically hers is this fear of, if you show these sides of you, you won't be taken seriously. If you are not taken seriously, people won't invest in you and you will die. Like that
And
is
that's
essentially the line.
And that's the result of her growing up in an environment where that was very much the case for most people.
I mean,
And it
music and
continues to
dance
be.
is illegal in Iran still today. I would go to jail if the government in which my mom was raised under saw my videos. So it does make sense that that fear is there. But when someone has grown up in a society like that, that trauma is always going to be there. So I think I grew up seeing what that looks like and really not wanting it to be mine, but also still having it in my subconscious. I definitely wasn't even if I would dance, I definitely would not show that side of me. So I think it was like a little bit at a time. Maybe I would show in a story or something, or maybe I would show like, and then if whatever the response was from the story, that would help me eventually share it on my feed. And then from there, I would see that it was actually inspiring people to connect to their bodies and they were responsive to it. And this story I had in my mind that everyone would hate me was not true. And to today, 99% of the response I get when I'm dancing is positive. So I think you don't have to jump into it overnight, but feeling it out and feeling, okay, if I dip my toe in the water, how do I feel afterwards is how you build up that confidence.
Is it a part of a bigger statement for you? And do you find that expression to be part of your part in shifting this, or is it simply just, this is just me and I'm just doing me?
It's so funny because it started with, this is just me, and it wasn't so much of a statement, it was just a natural expression of who I am. And I remember I posted a video of myself doing this little belly dance thing back in December, and people were like, you are brave, wow, to show your body, your fat shaking like that, like applauding me. I was like, wait, what? I was just showing a video of myself dancing, but all people can see is you have fat on your stomach, and the fact that you are showing yourself shaking that fat is an act of body positivity, even though that was not my intention. So it's kind of interesting that a woman just being herself is a statement.
You know what's funny is I received the same thing for crying.
They're like, wow, crying, relax.
Yeah, no, seriously. Making the YouTube show, The Art of Choosing Love, and the number of messages of, you are so brave for showing that vulnerability and that authenticity. And I feel like it's similar. Like if someone showed a video of a woman crying, they wouldn't probably think that same exact thing, but you dancing is now that thing. And then for me, if I was just dancing, I don't know that I would get those, like, you're so brave, but I definitely got them for crying. It's so fascinating to see that it's the same thing. Do you know what I mean? It's the same thing. It's the same perspective of what is socially acceptable or not. And then the projection onto your actions based on what I think is brave or not. Whereas, do you, like when you first started, do you remember your first dance video? Like, do you remember when you said, ooh, do I share this? Should I share this? And was it like that sort of thing?
Oh, 100%. Because I would, take the videos on my phone, but, never share them. And I think the first time I did, I was like checking a million times to see, like, am I going to be like deleted off Instagram and everyone unfollow me? And I definitely had so much fear there. And then, you just see life goes on. People probably don't think that much. So then that allowed me to share more and more. And now, really, with my work of connecting to the goddess, that is what the goddess is. She is all aspects of the feminine. I think a lot of the conversation around masculine and feminine creates just a lot of juxtaposition between the two, like masculine, assertive, like gets shit done, powerful, strong, feminine, submissive, soft, dainty. And I think it's great that we're talking about these differences, but also a mother giving birth is a fucking badass, and that's feminine. Or who has her car under her kid underneath the car and lifts up the car, like that is strong and that is fierce and that is also feminine. So I like to bring to the conversation that femininity is not this one thing, that we're kind of going back to the 1950s like household vibes of understanding polarity, and that is not exactly what it is.
Yeah, I actually prefer to think of everything on a spectrum of divine androgyny.
Mm.
So it really is. We have all of it. We have all of it. You have these polar polarities of energy, the yin and the yang that exist within you, just like I have them in me. And I would say that even giving them masculine and feminine as labels, because if we were to just call them yin energy and yang energy, people would relate to them differently.
Mm-hmm.
But the moment that we've said this is the divine feminine and this is divine masculine, there is no way for most, I would say this, for most people in today's society, masculine and feminine have so much other context that it's almost impossible to perceive these polarities of energy without adding that societal context to the label.
Absolutely. And then it becomes another thing that we're bad at. I see so many women like, oh, I'm so bad at being feminine. I'm the worst feminine being ever. And it's like this other thing that you didn't check off your to-do list of being a spiritual being, which is like exactly the opposite of what this journey is about.
Yeah, fully. So, what is it for you then that now, how do you weave all of it together? So the people who've been doing the thing and they've got one thing and they want to express in this way, how have you found a way to cohesively weave all of these pieces into Sahara Rose as a business, but also just as a person?
Mm-hmm. So to me, dharma is everything. It is the word I have tattooed on me. Dharma is to live your soul's purpose. And your soul's purpose is, again, not defined by one job or more modality. It is the expression of who you are. So let's say your dharma is to bring beauty to this world. Right. So you can do it through poetry. You can do it through documentaries. You can do it through this community. There's so many ways, but really the ethos of what you are doing is bringing beauty to this world. Right. So we all have these dharmas, which are more like mission statements, but how we are thinking about them in our societies is more like the services. So to me, living your dharma, living your truest expression allows that space for the different modalities to come through. There's space for me to connect with my sisters in this way. And there's space for me to have conversations about business because it's all interrelated to me embodying and sharing the soul mission that I believe that I and each of us were assigned to. And that will have different iterations of it too. So the lens that I see life through are the doshas. So I see your dharma through the doshas. I see your business through the doshas. I see relationships through the doshas. I believe that is why Ayurveda was such a huge part of my life. So I could understand them at such a core fundamental level, but take these concepts out of just food and nutrition and self care into okay, there's an issue in my relationship. Okay, maybe I've been really in my pitta. And this is also a good way of having that energy without talking about masculine and feminine. You know, your pitta is more of your fire energy, your vata more airy, your kapha more earthy. So, how I tie it all together is living your dharma through the doshas so you can embody your divine essence.
And so for people who are sitting here going, I don't know what my dharma is,
Mhm.
what is the advice you have for how to find it? How can people find that thing that they can apply to uh, the various aspects of life?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like the eternal question, right? You know, what is the purpose of life? But I think the more interesting one is like, what is the purpose of my life, right? So, there's so many different practices and stuff that I share, but one really good, easy way is to think about how you were as a child. So, looking at the doshas in the lens of how you were naturally as a kid, because as a kid, you were just in your most authentic expression without anyone telling you what to do. So, were you that kid that was, you know, making art projects and creating imaginary friends and like super in their thoughts and their imagination? That's the Vata archetype. Were you that kid that was like running around outside and playing board games and like getting competitive and constantly getting hurt? That's that pitta, that fire energy. Were you that kid that was, you know, playing house and I'm going to be the mom and you're going to be the dad and taking care of animals and taking care of, you know, your baby dolls? That's that kapha energy. So looking at who you were in your fullest expression, there's going to be, you know, a thread that's connected to today. So maybe you're not playing sports anymore, but maybe you get that competitive drive when you are in the entrepreneurial space, or the creative can, you know, so many different modalities that you share here, or the kapha through being a coach. So it's just looking at how can I bring up those attributes in a way that can be of service to others. So there's a distinction between something that I might like to do for myself and how I like to be of service to others. And your dharma is really how you want to offer to the other, to the outside world. So like, for example, I love doing yoga, but I never had the opportunity to do a yoga teacher training. I was like, oh, like I'm supposed to do a yoga teacher training because that's what yogis do, right? But when I really got down to it, I don't like teaching yoga. I don't like adjusting people. Like it is just not my thing. I can love doing it. It can be my daily practice, but it's not how I like to be of service. So I think that sometimes we try to monetize every single hobby we have, but not every single one of them is meant to be. So really think about something that you would love to do in a way that it is for others, and really honing in on that skill in your authentic way is the ultimate way to embody your dosha and allow the iterations of it to shift, because we have different times in our lives that are about, you know, different doshas. For example, if you have children, that's going to bring you way more into your kapha. If you were just running a super big business, you're going to be more into your pitta. If you were just in Bali for a year, you're going to be more into your vata. So it's like honoring those ebbs and flows that we live through as well.
That's a really great way of putting it. Thank you. I know I put you on the spot. Like, what's the meaning of life? Help me find my purpose. And now's a good time. Everyone who's here live, if you have some questions for myself or Sahara, please just type them into the chat, and we'll get to them as best we can. So for myself, I used to hold on to this belief that find what you love to do, right? And then that is find what you would do for free, basically, and then find a way to monetize it.
Mm-hmm.
And hearing you speak, I think I would actually revise what I used to say, and put it into that dharmic category, which is find what you love to do, figure out how to express that through service, and then monetize it.
Mm-hmm.
Because by expressing it through service, you already now have figured out where the demand might be, right? Because you're putting yourself in what do they need, not just what do I want to do. And so
Mm-hmm.
that little extra shift is really valuable and super important for people. And so one thing that happened in the where was it? It was the virtual house party. So we have this event here in the Create community. We have one on Saturday night at 7 p.m. if you want to come. It's the virtual house party, and I had a prompt, and I was in this small group, and I was asked the question, "What was the first piece of poetry you ever wrote?" And it brought me back because when I went home to visit my family, I got into a box with my mom had kept all the scrapbooks of all the things from when I was in kindergarten and all this stuff. I had books, like pages and pages and pages of poetry from 5-year-old me, 6-year-old me, 7-year-old me. And they read like, I like lamp. It lights up the dark. I like lamp. It really deep, meaningful stuff. And yet at the same time, it was poetry and pages and pages and pages of it. And so to be able to see that and be reminded that we come in with an imprint. We come in with something on our soul that wants to be expressed. And my mom, I didn't even know you were in here. Look at that. I won prizes for those poems. Clearly. Awesome. That's good to know. It's a nice feeling. And to see it come full circle, and see that I've been able to weave it into my dharma and be expressing that is really powerful and feels so fulfilling. And so I love your suggestion of what is your child doing, when you tune into that.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And hello, Mama Roa in the chat. And exactly, from a more Vedic spiritual perspective, it would say your soul came into this lifetime to create poetry, and your child self knew that authentically. And then maybe the fears and limitations from the outside world for a moment of time made you forget. I don't know if that was the case for you. For a lot of people, they live the rest of their lives in that forgetting. They never come back to that state of knowing. So it's not so much, I think people are obsessed with change, like a New Year's resolution, I'm going to change. It's not so much as changing more than it is becoming who you already were.
Yeah, and I would say that the what tends to happen and what happened for me is the what's realistic gets popped in, and that's generally what's popped in by our parents first and foremost, our friends and our teachers and our role models, the society, the groups that are around us. Because I know for me, for example, when I wanted to be a performer and an actor, and I was doing that all as a kid in plays and junior high school, it shifted for me when I decided that I wasn't good looking enough. I wasn't tall enough. I was far too Asian looking. I was much more Asian looking when I was younger, and there was no one on TV that looked like me. So I went, who am I going to? I'm going to be the first one ever? What? And then along came Keanu Reeves. Thank you, Keanu. He reinvigorated that spark for me. But that reality check that is given to us and that we take on, I think, is where that the innocence of the child that is already expressed in their dharma is really beautiful, and where it kind of hits that first thing that shuts it down.
Exactly. And even that word realistic, that was a huge word for me as well. And it's like, what is realistic? Like, what does that mean? What do we even categorize as that? Because my version of what's realistic is going to be different based off of my background and my upbringing versus someone else's. So when someone tells us to be realistic, there's no actual tangible thing of what that looks like. If you're born in a family of poets, what you believe to be realistic is very different than if I grew up in a family of engineers. So I think if we really look that realism, whatever, doesn't actually exist. And it's up to us to define what that is. Right now in our community of people living their dharmas to the fullest extent, our realistic is very, very different from other people. We're like, wait, they didn't have like a 6-figure launch. Like, it is in such a different ball game. But most of us are in, and I believe that we were born into whatever paradigm that we were meant to shift. So you may have been born into a paradigm of poverty or addiction or patriarchy or whatever it is, because that was the exact microcosm of the thing that we were meant to shift. We were supposed to live so deeply inside it to understand, the nuances of addiction or anger or whatever else it is, to break free from that paradigm for ourselves and for the entire lineage moving forward.
Yeah, that's really well put. And just looking into the comments here, which with Jose was talking about, he said he's really struggling to figure out what his dharma is. And to comment to that, and maybe you can add to this, I feel as if you have attached struggle to dharma, I think that in itself is an indication of the lens through which you're perceiving it that actually gets to shift, because the dharma is about what's the thing that lights you up.
Mm-hmm.
What's the thing that brings just so much joy to your life, and how does that turn into service? But it I would suggest not making it a struggle to figure out. And I don't know where that stems from, this idea that we need to know what our purpose is, what our dharma is, and that lens of needing to do it puts that, again, right or wrong. You either are succeeding at it or you're not, as opposed to the beautiful unfolding of following your heart.
Well, I think, when you don't, it's like you get dropped off at a party, you have no idea why you're there. You're like, why am I here? It's so natural for us to want to know our purpose because as humans, we have always been goal oriented. We have always had a civilization to build, or pyramids, or this or that. So, us living without a purpose actually prevents us from really being happy. And once you go so deep into purpose, you realize that that purpose was actually just this thing that you were aiming towards, and happiness is so much larger than that. But I don't think you can fully get there until you know that you are living your purpose and then you move past just that one purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, had you never, let's say you were just in a corporate finance job and poetry was something you just remembered that you liked to do when you saw that box as a kid. I think that there would be this lingering thought forever in the back of your mind of what would my life look like had I given it a shot?
Mm. I agree, and I don't know about you, but for me, I've worked with so many clients, specifically one-on-one clients, who come to me at a stage in their life where they've achieved the success that they were striving for financially, their career, their house, and their cars, and all the things, and going, "This didn't bring me what I wanted. This
Mm-hmm.
didn't bring me what I wanted, and now I don't know what to do." I don't know what to do. And so I feel very blessed because I had that moment at 18 years old. I had that moment of getting to the mountaintop that I wanted more than anything, getting there and going, wait a second, nothing's different here, actually. Nothing's nothing's different. What do I do? And so that moment, I feel so blessed. Speaking to what you said of kind of we're born into the thing that really shapes us, the paradigm that really shapes us. Having that experience at such a young age broke the paradigm for me of thinking that if I could focus on something outside of myself and achieve it and get it, that everything would shift. It didn't happen, and so really appreciate what you've been sharing and the way that you do it. And for everyone listening to this, how can they find you? I know you got a lot of different places, but I'd love if you could let them know, because your content's amazing. Your content's
Mm.
amazing. I enjoy it so much.
Thank you so much. So the best place is on my Instagram at I am Sahara Rose. I also have on my website a dosha quiz. So if you're like, I want to learn more about these doshas and which one am I, it's iamsahararose.com. There's a dosha quiz right on top, and it will tell you everything about your mind and body and what to do about it.
Great. Thank you so much. And Sahara, I appreciate you coming on here for the Deep Dive Live. I appreciate all of the Create members who are here tuning in live. And let's show Sahara some love on the screen. Just
Um,
blast her with so much appreciation for being here today. And I encourage you to check out what she's got going. And I want to remind everybody that always, in always, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved.